I bow to Lord Krishna, who is of the nature of Sat, Chit, and Ananda, and who takes away the threefold pains of existence. So today we are starting with the very first verse of the Bhagavatam, which is a very important verse because it gives the essence of the whole book. That is said in the very beginning itself. It speaks about truth. That जन्माद्यस्वदानविदरस्ताष्टेष विघ्नस्वराट् तेने ब्रह्महृदादिकवये मुह्यन्त्यत्सूरय तेजो वारिमृदाय दामिन्मयो यत्तत्र तद्गोमुषा धाम्ना स्वेन सदा निरस्तहुकहं सत्यं परं धीमहि धर्मप्रोञ्झितवैतवोत्रकर्मो निर्मत्सराणां सदां वेद्यं वास्तमत्र वस्तु शिवदं तापत्रयोन्मूलनं श्रीमद्भागवते महामनिगते किंवापरेश्वर सद्योरिद्यशुश्रूषभित्तक्षणात् निगमकल्पतरोगलदम्बलं शुगमुगादमृतद्रवसंयुतं पिबत भागवतं रसमालयं मुहुरहो रसिका भुवि भावुकाः. We meditate on that transcendental reality which exists before creation, during creation, and after creation. That indeed is the truth of all existence, the truth of our being, and the truth of this cosmic and the universe itself. On that truth do I meditate. Satyam param dhimahi. Satyam param. Satyam means truth. On that truth alone do I meditate. This is repeated again at the end of the Bhagavatam, Satyam Param Dhimahi. And at the birth of Lord Krishna also it is again repeated, how he is Satyavradam, Satyamradam, and so on. So normally when we talk about God, there's so many different types of ideas, and we immediately get a form or something which is different from everything else. So the Bhagavatam in this beginning verse does not talk of any, form of God. It says that God is truth itself. And indeed God is truth. But unfortunately we call that truth by many names. That is where the problem arises. So people argue about the names of gods. But in this verse, as I said, the Bhagavatam calls it truth alone. And that truth is something which has ever existed. That is Trikala Satyam. It has existed in the past, it exists in the present, and will continue to exist in the future. Now the world that we know is not Trikala Satyam. It's constantly changing. The Buddhists say that you can never step into the same river twice. It's always flowing. Similarly, time is always flowing. We can never catch it, and we can never try to hold it or make dams on it like we do on the Ganga, poor thing. So then this truth, which keeps flowing ever, how is that to be, how do we understand that truth? Where is it to be found? That truth is something, you cannot search for that truth in the outside world. Because for the very person who is, it's not an object of your consciousness. It is the supreme subject. How can you search, how the subject is trying to search for an object which is the subject itself? There is nothing called an object. There's nothing objective in this whole truth. The whole thing is a supreme subject. So how can the eye ever see itself? How can the ear look at itself? It is the supreme seer of everything. So it cannot be seen it can only be experienced. Pibada Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Bhavuga is what Rasika Bhavuga. So that can only be come as an experience of our life. Now, what is next? He talks about Tabatrayo Unmoolanam. Unmoolanam what? He takes away, this Bhagavatam takes away or digs out from the very roots the threefold pains of human existence. What are these threefold pains of human existence? Number one, the world itself. The world itself is a source of pain. Now you may say, all of you are rich and have everything you want and so on. You may say, no, I love this world. It gives me everything I want. But by its very nature, the world cannot give you only happiness. Because the world is a world of duality. If there is happiness, there has to be unhappiness. If there is joy, there has to be sorrow. If there is daytime now, there has to be nighttime. Its very nature is made of duality. So how can you get only happiness from a world which has both happiness and unhappiness? So the world itself, even though you may get, if you are very, very rich or very healthy or whatever, you may think that the world is enough. I can easily get all my happiness from it. But everybody will find at one time or other that the world is not a source of happiness. Yes, it is a source of happiness, but it is also a source of unhappiness. It cannot be otherwise. That is the very nature of the world. So the world itself is one of the sources of unhappiness. Tabatra. Three types of problems. What is the next problem that we face? Our body. Our body itself is a source of pain for us. You may think that, when you're young and healthy and everything is at your command, that nothing doesn't matter, I can easily surmount anything by my own. But the word used in, one of the words used for body in Sanskrit is kshetra. Kshetra means field. And in a field, even though you may sow only good seeds, 100% weeds will come up. You have to keep weeding it. So, this body, even though you may give it the best of foods, all the medicines you can think of, all the pills and all the comforts that you can ever think of, yet it will, by its very nature, it is slowly degenerating. From the time you are born, you have taken a step towards death. So all the time it is slowly degenerating, and it has to give you pain at some time or other. Now on the toe, now on the foot, now on the knee, now on the back. This is something which is inevitable. So your body itself is your second source of pain. Now what is your third source of pain? Tapatra, he said, third source of pain is your mind. Mind meaning your ego. Because the mind is even though everything is good for it, all the things that you may have everything you need and so on, the mind will immediately think of something or other to worry about. It is, most people make a habit of worrying, because even if they have nothing to worry about, they'll think up of something. I wonder what's happening in my house now. Did I keep the keys? And did I keep the key? Where did I keep those keys? Or something or other you will find to worry about. Moreover, the mind and the ego are closely connected. The mind is the ego, in other words. And this ego will always want this. I want this, I want that, I want that, I want this. Something or other it's always yearning for, and whatever it has, there is never an end to that yearning of this ego. So then, these are the three main sources of problems for us in the world. These are the three problems which we face in life. Now the Bhagavatam is supposed to unmoolanam, tapataryon unmoolanam. So how can it take away these threefold sources of pain? What is the method? What is the method? How can we get beyond these threefold? Now let us think of our own daily experiences. There is one place where these threefold pains do not exist. And what is that place? In the state of deep sleep, sushupti. Everyone loves to sleep. We can't do without. Now, one of the most beautiful experiences everyone can enjoy is that of deep sleep. And it is the same for everyone. Whether you are Mukesh Ambani living in his 57-story, this thing on a most wonderful bed and air conditioning and what not. And that beggar, I've seen beggars in Rishikesh near the When you come into Shivananda Ashram, there's a ledge 4 feet higher than the road. They will quickly take their places in the previous evening, book their places on that ledge. They will put the kambal and all that on that ledge, and so that they have it in the night, happily sleeping 4 feet down is the road. If they turn over once and they're down in the passing cars up and down. So, but it's blissful sleep. Everybody loves to sleep because that is the one place where these three things don't intrude. Neither the world nor the body, if you have a healthy body. I'm sorry, some people may be having very bad sleep because of their unhealthy, but we are taking normally. And this ego also. Main thing, the mind doesn't seem to be there, no ego there. So you have a beautiful, that is a blissful, but who is that? There is something there still. Because now supposing here we are in this waking state, Jagrat it's called, waking state of consciousness. I can see you, I hope everybody is in the waking state of consciousness. Some people I think around there are not too, anyway, I shan't mention more, but however, in this waking, we enjoy the same reality. I see you, you see me, you see the beautiful Ganga over there, and so many things are going on. But supposing you fall asleep here and you are trying to swim across the Ganga and you know the current is pulling you down and you get all the experiences of fear and terrible feeling is there. What is your reality? This reality is gone. We don't know where it went. It's gone. This reality, into that truth it has been drawn in. Now, that reality for you is very, very real. The Ganga, the feeling of the cold, the fear, everything. Now, supposing after that you fall into exhausted sleep over here. That is wonderful. But you wake up and you say, I had a terrible nightmare. That I had a lovely sleep. So there was something called an I over there. Some I was watching. Now this is that I. Everybody has an island. An island inside us. An island inside us. All of us have this beautiful little, we all dream of going, owning an island in the Caribbean or something like that. Now we all have it. We have this beautiful, lovely, wonderful island inside us. It is that I inside us, which is the experiencer of the waking state, the dreaming state, and that who experiences the blissful, deep sleep state. So that is the truth in you. That is your truth. Because everything else is changing. But that I is ever stable, ever beyond the three states of time. It's beyond, it's Trikala Satyam. Because even when this body eventually falls away and we are, buried or cremated or whatever, that even a person who dies, you have some experiences, I think, of people dying and watching their body. Who was that I watching that body? Out of body experiences and so on. So that I is your eternal spirit which is ever existing and which does not die with the death of the body. Because all of us fear more than anything else. The fear of death is the greatest of all fears. And it automatically, it happens that the love of life is the greatest of all loves. We love ourselves more than anything else. The mother loves the child for the sake of her own self. The husband loves the wife for the sake of his own self. Everything is centered around that self, which is the supreme subject, which is that which exists in all the three states of time, and which is it is eternal and cannot never come to be destroyed. So this is the truth about the Bhagavatam. The first, I'm still on this first verse of Bhagavatam because it's of utmost importance that you know this first verse. And now he says, who are these now? This is the truth. Now, who are these people who are capable of appreciating this? Nirmatsaranam sadam vedyam, he says. Nirmatsara, who are these? Those who are not having a competitive spirit. From the time a child is born, he is put into this competitive drive. You must do better than your other person. You must do this. You must be cleverer. You must be perfect. You must be first. That competitive spirit is given from the child from the time he is born. Indians, as a rule, can never stand in a queue. They have to cut the queue. Nobody, I mean, you go abroad, you'll see people standing in a queue. Indians, even if it's a car, one car will come cut the other. Then another one will cut the other. And when you have to cross the crossing, railway crossing, the whole thing is bunged up and dammed, as it were. And we have to wait for one, somehow, for that big, this thing. We just cannot do it because we have a lot of matsara spirit in us. Constant competition. I must get before that. I must do this. I must run that. So that nirmatsaranam spirit we must be having if we can catch hold. Because what is this? This I, when you realize that I is the same as, I'm looking at your eyes, and what do I see? I see me. I don't see you, I see me. That I is present in everything. It's present in the whole world. It's present in you and me and the dog and the cat or whatever it is. That I is that truth. And such a person will never try to beat the other person. Because why? Your pain is my pain. If you want to go first, in the same way as I want to go first, so we are both in the same boat. So you are already before me, let him go. That we never think. Because we see everything as different from me. Aham tvam, amatvam, me, mine. Everything is revolves around me. If somebody says, oh, you know, I had a bad headache yesterday, immediately you say, I too had a very bad headache day before yesterday. Same type. Now, instead of sympathizing with that poor chap who says he's got a bad headache, oh, did you have it? No, I too had. Immediately your thought is, how I had a bad this thing also the other day. So that is so strong in us, that ego. That ego cannot get away from the fact that I am superior, I am the best. Of course, the fact is that you are the best. You are superior. But why? Not because of this 6'3" or 5'4" that you are, but because you are that Supreme Self. But that Supreme Self is in everybody. And therefore, if you can appreciate that fact, then only you can understand the message of the Bhagavatam. That's why immediately the first thing he says, Nirmatsaranam sadam vedyam, only the Nirmatsara can understand this truth. Because only he can see everybody with the same eye, look on everything with the same love. To whom the pain of others is the same as his own pain. So that is, now, immediately what happens? Not only that, he gets that Shivadam, that such a person who understands and appreciates that, Shivadam, he's filled immediately with auspiciousness. Tabataryon mulam nirvatsranam sadam vedyam vastamatra vasujam tabataryon mulanam. That, what verse is that? Srimad Bhagavate Mahapurane. So, in that, from where did he get this? Bhagavatam, it comes from the parrot-like mouth of Sri Shuka. Shuka is the parrot who is giving it us. What is the what is a good qualification of a parrot? You might think, parrot? Why are we taking an example of a parrot? The parrot can reproduce exactly what you tell him. You teach him one thing, he'll exactly. Here I'm reminded of one robber went to rob a house. And he was going slowly. Then there's a parrot there. He started screaming, Jesus is looking at you. Jesus is looking at you. Jesus is looking at you. Then the robber said, shut up, you parrot. I don't care about Jesus. So again the parrot, Jesus is looking at you, and as he put his hand on the other thing, out came a Rottweiler mastiff who jumped on him and said, and the parrot screaming, Jesus is looking at you, Jesus is looking at you. Of course the dog's name was Jesus. So this is the parrot. Parrot can exactly reproduce whatever you tell. So that is why Sri Shuka is like the parrot who has given us the essence. Now, again, what is it so important? What is it Bhagavatam has done, which is greater, makes it greater than the Vedas or the Mahabharata? So he has taken out the essence of the Vedas. He has taken out the essence of the Upanishads and the Vedas, and he has given us to it. Now that resam. Everybody knows what is resam. Resam makes a good any food becomes extra good with resam. For those who don't know, a resam is a kind of a extremely a tasty dish which is made in South India. So this rasam is the essence of anything. So he has taken out the rasam out of the Vedas and so on and given it to us. So that is what makes the Bhagavatam so sweet. Now who are they again? Who are they who can appreciate? Bhavuka and Rasika. So this Nigamakatpadaram kalidam phalam Shugamugad amritadrava samvidam Pibata Bhagavatam rasamalyo Rasiga bhuvi bhavuka. He has taken out from the fruit called of the Vedas. What is the sweetest part of a tree? It's a fruit. And that essence he has taken out. Because you can, suppose all of us like cane juice. I don't know if you like cane juice, but anyway, I do. So he says, when if somebody you go and buy a piece of cane, I love cane juice. Okay, here, take this. What are you to do with it? I mean, most people don't have the teeth to, bite and squeeze out but a cane juice seller will put it in the machine and squeeze out the last drop and give it to you. Imagine what a delicious treat it is to drink that glass of cane juice. Exactly what Shuga has done to us, Sri Shuga has done. He squeezed out the lovely juice of the tree of the Vedas. It is the immortal nectar of the Vedas. He squeezed out and made it easily understandable by all of us. And who are those who can enjoy? I told you yesterday itself there are two types. There's a difference between listening and hearing. You hear with your ears, but you listen with your heart. So these bhavukas and rasikas, they listen with their hearts because they appreciate the whole thing. And rasikas, they enjoy. They enjoy every bit of morsel. Have you seen a poor child having an ice cream cone? Our own children are so spoiled, they'll jump and then throw away. But these poor children, slowly, they lick and lick to the last, and they'll crunch up the cone to the last little bit. It's a delicious delight to see them eat. These are the rasikas who will keep on licking at the cone of life. They'll find some sort of humor, amusement, because the life is actually very humorous if you can only see the humor in it. Even in the midst of pain, we are all out to lick for the day. We're like the frog caught in the mouth of a snake. You don't know when that snake might snap it at the end of the frog. But the frog is busy trying to catch one fly which is flying around its neck. All of us, we all want to catch as much joy as we can from this, not knowing that any moment, snap shut, the snake will of time will snap shut, and that's the end of the frog looking for the fly. So these are if you want, rasikas are the ones who are ever interested, ever longing, and ever happy to imbibe that like a wine taster, a tea taster. Have you watched any of a taster? They will put a few spoonful of wine and then swivel it round their mouth. You may think I haven't done it, I just saw it being done. That's all. And they swivel it round their mouth, then they can analyze the slight difference between something of existed 18 something and 19 something and something. Every little bit they know the difference. These are the tasters of wine. We are supposed to be tasters of life, the rasikas who taste life and enjoy it to the utmost. Because why? We know that all this is a passing show. All this which we are suffering, the pain on my hand, the cold, sometimes I cuddle up, then when I hot, I say, oh, I want fan, and so all these differences are passing shows in the drama of life. Because they know that who are they really? This life is given, we are given infinite chances to get to attain that liberation. We have eternity at our command, immortality as our goal, and God Himself as our one and only traveling companion. So this is the life which we are given. And if they understand this, they will enjoy the presence of that companion who is ever with them. They will not crave and ask for more and more of things of this world. They will, and it may have come or not. It's not that nobody tries to stop you from having it. So they don't stop you, but you must understand that there is a deeper meaning to life. So that deeper meaning is what is being given in the Bhagavatam. And that the first verse itself of the Bhagavatam gives the whole thing so beautifully. If you can understand that, if the whole thing is given so clearly in the very first verse itself. So now, when we come, now that we've realized that these are the essence of the Bhagavatam, now what does he come to? As I told you, this the scenario of the Bhagavatam is kept in a forest called Naimisharanyam, and there the Shaunaka questions the Sutta. Suttas were minstrels, ancient minstrels. We didn't have books in those days, but the Suttas knew all the Puranas by heart. And they went from place to place to place, giving discourses on the Puranas so that people will come to know. How else do they know? That's why our Puranas have lasted till now, because these Suttas were coming all through. They went up and down the whole of Bharat, giving discourses. They were really great sages also in their own. And I already told you about this particular Ugrasravas is his name. So he was one who was able to remember and everything that he had ever heard. So then the question they ask now is what is the how did it come about? How did this story come out? Who gave it to whom, and so on. So here we have Narada, as I told you. He's the one who will bring it. He enjoys bringing people together. So the first thing again we see is that Narada comes because Vyasa is the one who wrote the Bhagavatam. It's the story of how he wrote the Bhagavatam, I said. As I told you yesterday, he made the Vedas into 4. He wrote the 18 Puranas, and he wrote also the Mahabharatam. And he went to the Himalayas, to this what we call now as Badrinath, but it's known as Badrikashramam. And there he was living, and he was really, really sad, because he had written so many books, and not even his son had read even one of them. I mean, this was really a painful, painful thing for Vyasa. Imagine all these voluminous texts you have written, and they are, catching dust in the bookshops. Nobody to buy even in a small. So naturally, poor Vyasa was in a very sad and sorry state of affairs. So then he was thinking, now what shall I do? How is it that I cannot find any peace of mind? And who should come there but Narada? Narada is the one who always comes bringing up comfort, stringing his lute, saying, Narayana, 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 Narayana. He'd come, and there he came, singing his lute, and told Vyasa, what is happening to you? Narada's always on the lookout. Where can he help somebody to get, evolve themselves? So Vyasa told about his predicament. What can I do? This is really terrible. Nobody reads my books. How terrible. I write book after book after book and nobody reads my book. So then I thought at least the Mahabharata would be something good for everybody. But even that is so huge. The thickness puts them off. So then Narada said, I'll tell you what. The fact is that I agree, there are 4 Purusharthas in Hinduism. Purusharthas are the goals of life. Dharmartha, Kama, Moksha. He says, you have written about dharma, that dharma is the way of righteousness. And you have been consistently harping on that dharma, which will give you artha and kama. But why should you do that? You don't have to, we don't need a scripture to tell us that you have to earn money or that you have to get some pleasure out of life. No scripture need tell us that. We all do it automatically. It's a human thing to earn. Nothing wrong with money also. That doesn't matter. Because if we had no money, none of you would be here today. All of us have spent so much of money to come here, and there's no problem in having money as such. The fact is, when money becomes the goal of life, and it is useless for the person who earns it, and useless for anybody else. For instance, the politicians. They're supposed to have crores in the banks of in Swiss banks or some UK land in the UK, and so many things. I don't even know what these things are about. So, how does it help them? Even then, they can only eat 2 idlis and some sambar, or a roti and some sabji. They have only one stomach. How is this money going to help them? And how much can they go for pleasure? Okay, how much can they go for pleasure? How many times can you go to Las Vegas or Bahamas or Switzerland or whatever you want to go? They've gone 100 times. So everything is, the first time is a wonderful time. After that, you've seen it once, you've seen them all. It doesn't, and the fact is that any pleasure, now I told you the world is a world of duality. So when there is happiness, there has to be unhappiness. It is attached to it. It's attached to it. Even the greatest joy that you can have has its opposite of sorrow in it. Because supposing you say, let us think, now, I love chocolates, okay. And I took one chocolate, I love it, I'm beautiful. But somebody keeps a box of chocolates near me and I keeps feeding me. By the 10th chocolate, you're ready to puke. That which gave you greatest happiness at one moment is going to give you greatest unhappiness at the other. So they inevitably linked. The counter correlatives. You cannot have one without the other. So everything in life has its opposite to that. So then so Narada tells him, what's the point of your telling people the dharma which will give them pleasure and money? You don't have to do that. They will automatically do. So you see, kama and artha, that is money and pleasure, is okay. But you have to understand that the goal of life is moksha, or liberation from that. And what has in Hinduism, kama and artha and kama has been put between the 2 barriers of dharma and moksha. It's like 2 rails of a train. They are told how you should run on that rail, provided you have dharma and moksha on either side. So this is what you have been doing. You have not been telling these. Not only that, even had you been telling, the fact is that people will go their own way, whatever you may say. They just don't realize. So what you have missing in all this is one thing, that is bhakti. So Narada claimed bhakti to be the 5th Purushartha. Dharmartha, Kama, Moksha, and bhakti is the highest and the greatest of all the Purusharthas. You have not put enough of bhakti in your books, my dear Vyasa. Therefore, I suggest you write a book on especially the glories of the Lord, especially in his incarnation as Lord Krishna, because he's the God of love. And if we have can that essence of that love, if we can have that this thing, that is the thing which will bring delight to the world. And therefore I suggest you write a book on, especially on Lord Krishna. So then Vyasa decided. And then to give a point to that, Narada actually gives his own life story. He says, you know, in my previous birth, many births before in fact, I was the son of a dasi, a servant, maid servant. And my mother, you know, even though she was only a dasi, she knew that, I think instinctively she knew that I should be given a better chance in life. And chance in life not materially but spiritually. So she used to go and do the work of, you know, the sages in olden days. Sannyasis were not allowed to ever to stay in one place for a long length of time in case they become attached to it. They had to travel from place to place. Only time they could stay put was during the Chaturmasya, 4 months of the monsoon months. At that time they could stay in some place, and the other people also could benefit of their great experiences, and they could learn from them. So these 4 months they would stay. At that time, these many sannyasis were come and stayed in their village, and Narada's mother went and was doing seva to them. Now this child was an extraordinary child. He was only 7 years old, but he used to go and listen to all the discourses which were being. And he imbibed so much of that he just didn't, his ears and his heart and all were filled with this stories and the truths which were being said by the sannyasis. Then when after 4 months, when the sannyasis also knew that this boy, and so they also took special care for him. And he said, Uchishtam, having eaten of the prasad which was left over from them, he became really a high soul. And when the sannyasis left, he was bereft. He didn't know what can he do. He couldn't go after them because his mother was he was the only support. Even though he was only 7, that he was at least she had him with her. So then, luckily for him, he says, the mother was bitten by a snake and died. But now he's not saying it in a bad way. The fact is, when time is ripe for us to evolve, and we have to leave this life which we have had, some circumstance will come by which we can leave without any problem. There'll be a pull somewhere. There's a pull. That is now, how have you all come here? You've been pulled by something or other. You know, when there's a magnet in one place and iron filings, if you look at it, you will think the iron filings are moving of their own accord. But actually it's a magnet which is pulling them. Similarly, that magnet who pulled you here is Krishna. Karshadidi, Krishna is the name of the meaning of Krishna. He who attracts, he who draws, he who pulls towards you. So you've all been drawn like iron filings towards this Krishna, the stories of Krishna which are going on here. So then, as I said, circumstances, if you are ripe for this, your circumstances will come and give you an ability to leave that life and take up another life. So Narada says, luckily for me, my mother died, I was bitten by a snake, and I was free to go where I wished. And he went, and he did great tapas, and eventually it is said, he got a vision of some supreme vision, which is so breathtaking, so beautiful, that he was just totally immersed in it. But it vanished like that. And he was bereft, like the gopis must have been bereft when Krishna left them. He didn't know, he was filled with sorrow. And then a voice in his heart told him, you will never see this vision again in this life. So don't worry, but you will get an opportunity to meet me again. So he went, he tried, somehow or other, he finished off this life. And then this eon, he was born in another eon. With this opportunity, he became the saint Narada, and all he had to do, lovely work, all he had to do is strum his lute and go about saying Narayana, 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 Narayana. That was his main work, and he went from place to place trying to uplift and bring out humanity. Wherever he saw sorrow, or people wanting to be helped, he would go there. Similarly, that's how he helped Vyasa. And he went, strumming his lute, he went as he can. Now Vyasa sat down and said, this is a very good option. Now let me try to, and he wrote the Bhagavad Mahapurana, and now he didn't know whom should he teach it to. Please shut off all telephones. Whom should she teach this to? Because you have to have someone who will memorize, be able to memorize. And then he realized, who else but my son? And he recalled at the time when he was just very young boy, about 7 years old, Sri Shuka just left everything and walked out into the forest. And Vyasa called after him, my son, he called after him. And yam prabhranti anuvedam avedagatyam dvaivano virahakadara ajuhava putredi tanmayado taravo vinedum sam sarva bhuda hridayam munimanadosmi. This is one of the most beautiful slokas in the whole of Mahabharata. Because this is the only sloka which gives the description of a person in unity consciousness, cosmic consciousness. Sri Shuka was in a state of cosmic consciousness from his very birth itself. And as he went out, and the father called him, my son, my son. And who answered? Shuka did not even, he was going. The trees answered, here I am, here I am, here I am, here I am. It's the most amazing stotra, that they could even imagine a soul who was capable of such a thing. One who was one with the soul of the universe. So that everything was so he and he alone. And the trees answered instead of the sun answering. So Vyasa remembered that. Then he remembered another experience he had with his son. At that time he was already 16 years old, in the height of his youth and beauty. And Sri Shuka was like, he was avadut, naked. He never, clothes, nothing could capture his freedom of his soul. So Vyasa and he were walking along, and Sri Shuka walked ahead. And there was a lake in which Apsaras were bathing. And Apsaras, and Sri Shuka walked and went on. Vyasa came along, an old man. Sri Shuka, young man, 16 years old, very handsome, and totally naked. Apsaras kept on bathing and having a good time. Vyasa came along, old man, and immediately the Apsaras got out and quickly covered themselves. Vyasa was amazed. He says, look, my son just passed and you people didn't turn a hair. And now, when you see me, what do you think of me? Huh? That you must jump out and put your clothes and all that. So the Apsaras, what is the meaning of this? So Apsara said, Sri Shuka doesn't know he's a man or a woman or a human. He just is. He's a pure being. He doesn't see us, he just sees the Supreme Being everywhere. But you have not reached that state, my dear Vyasa. And therefore, we had to jump out and clothe ourselves. And so, Vyasa, now when he is sitting there, he is thinking. Obviously, his mind goes back to the Mahabharata. That's why, I don't know, I should have told you maybe to read the Mahabharata, which I've given you a synopsis yesterday. It is very important because now we are taking that. Anyway, to give you a very short account of the Mahabharata, it's a feud between two warring cousins, the Kauravas and the Pandavas. The 5 sons of Kunti, of Pandu, and the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra, known as the Kauravas. So their feud had lasted for a very, very long time. And eventually it ended in war, the great Mahabharata war. Now Vyasa goes back to the end of this war because, what is it? He goes back to the end of this war because now you must all understand the origin of Parikshit. Because the whole Bhagavatam is read by Shuka to Parikshit. So first of all you have to know who is this Parikshit. So that's why he goes back to the end of the Mahabharata war, when everything was, and only 4 of the Kauravas were left. That is Duryodhana himself. I wish you wouldn't do all this. I just can't keep my, train of thought if something goes on. There were only 4 Kauravas left: Duryodhana, Kripa, Ashwatthama, and Kritavarma, who was actually not a Kaurava, he belonged to the Yadava army. So then, at that time, they were totally devastated. The Pandavas were victorious due to Krishna, actually, and therefore Duryodhana was in a state of deep despair, and Bhima had already fought with him and thrashed him so that he left him. He had not died. He left him. And the Pandavas made their way back to their camp that night. But Krishna said, no, this is not a good time to stay in your camp. Come, let us go and stay in the banks of the Ganga, of the Yamuna. So he took them off. Now, who was sitting in the camps were the 5 sons of Draupadi's 5 sons by the 5 Pandavas, and her own Drishtadyumna and Shikandin were all sleeping in the Pandava camp. At that time, this Ashwatthama went to Duryodhana, who was dying, and said, can I do anything for you? He said, yes, get me at least 1 Pandava head, so that I'll be happy before I die. So even till the end, bitter end, all he was interested was in killing and, So Ashwatthama thought of a unique, it was already night time. Ashwatthama saw an owl going and taking the eggs from a crow's nest. And he said, this is how I will be. Let us go. He persuaded Kritavarma and Kripa to go with him in order to kill the Pandavas, as he thought, the Pandavas. But whom did he kill? They crept in the night into the Pandava camp and saw the sleeping people sitting there and cut off the heads of everybody. He didn't know that it was not the Pandavas, actually the children of the Pandavas. And of course, Duryodhana, they brought 1 head, and Duryodhana, he crushed it. No, this is not Bhima's head. I could never crush Bhima's head, it's so hard. So he knew that he died still very, very unhappy that he had. But however, Ashwatthama, this is terrible. Next morning when the Pandavas came, they found this terrible thing, and Draupadi, her 5 sons killed in one sweep. What sort of a victory was this of theirs? So she was very upset, and she told Arjuna, please, catch that, the man who has done this. So Arjuna and Krishna go off to catch Ashwatthama, and Ashwatthama, he brings him back and throws him in front of Draupadi and says, here, Krishna tells, you are the one who to tell what you want. Now, because he says, this is the killer of your sons, what do you want done with him? And to her great credit, Draupadi says, his mother Kripi is still alive. I don't want her to suffer what I'm feeling now. So please don't. And also, he is our Guru's son. A Guru's son has to be equal. To the greatest credit, because Draupadi was, behaved in a fashion totally unlike all of us. All of us, we have some bad trouble. We hopefully, if electricity fails, the first thing we do is to look there. Do they have light over there? Next house? If the next house has no light, happy. Then that's okay. So this is how we are. Draupadi, on the other hand, even though her own sons were dead, she did not want Ashwatthama's mother to suffer what she was doing. So Krishna said, all right. Actually, he did it to test her, And all other, what should we do with it? And so he told Arjuna Ashwatthama was born with a jewel on his head. And they said, cut off that top knot and the jewel, and it's as good as killing, and let him off. So they let him off like that. But he was such a rascal that he went away planning some future mischief. Then he decided. And he took up a blade of grass and invoked the Brahmastra and sent it. Now, his father had never taught him the whole of the mantra of Brahmastra. He had taught it to Arjuna. But Ashwatthama had got half of it. How to invoke it, but he didn't know how to revoke it. So then he threw this at the, and he had Pandava Hatam, all the Pandavas should die. So that then the Pandavas suddenly saw these Arjuna, they saw this fiery thing coming towards them. And quickly they took shelter behind Krishna. Krishna, aha, Krishna, save us, they said. So Krishna told Arjuna, don't worry. You send your Brahmastra also. The only thing which can, Arjuna was the only other one who knew the Brahma. He sent it and they stopped it. But Ashwatthama again was not happy over this. Again he sent it with the, to kill all of them. And again Lord Krishna saved him with the five of them with his Sudarshan Chakra. But at that time, this is a very beautiful scene. Who should come running to Krishna? She comes, Pahi Pahi Mahayogin, she says, running. Uttara, 16-year-old wife of Abhimanyu, who had been killed, brutally murdered in the war. She comes rushing to him and said, save me. She knew, child though she was, she knew that, because, this Master was, could harm the fetus of the, and that's how he had sent it. She said she knew that the only person who could save her, even though her grand uncles were there, all very great people, only Krishna could save her. She threw herself at his feet, Pahi Pahi Mahayogin. She said, Deva Deva Jagatpade, please save my child. She said, the only little bit of the Pandavas left she was carrying in her own child. There are only 3 occasions of total Sharanagati in the Mahabharata. One is Uttara. One was Draupadi when at the time of the Vastravarna. And next you will find Gajendra in Gajendra Moksham. Total Sharanagati. And how does Sharanagati work? When you know there's nobody else to help you. When everything else has failed. When nobody there, your friends or your doctors or your lawyers or your bankers, nothing is there anymore. Then you total Sharanagati in the Lord and 100% the answer will come. So her is one, and as Shuka tells Parikshit, actually, see, due to Parikshit later on once he mentions, I'm so grateful to my mother because it was only due to her action at that time, immediate action which she took at that time, when that fiery Brahmastra was coming towards, which would have killed me, that I am able to live today. Because she was carrying Parikshit in her womb. So then it is said, immediately Lord Krishna took the form of a small form inside and entered her womb. So that all the time when the child in the womb was always, that's why when he came out, this comes later, it is not listen to this Bhagavata Katha. I'm sorry we've exceeded our time, but I think we'll